I love using macro lenses for photos and videos because you can get as tight as you want with your subject. And in this video, we're going to take a look at the Lumix 100mm macro lens for L mount. This lens is amazing because Panasonic managed to make a macro lens that's the same size as all their other S prime lenses. So somehow the 100mm macro is the same size as the 24mm f1.8, the 35, the 50, the 18mm, and also the 85. And the size and weight on this thing is also so much smaller than any other macro I've ever used, and I've had a couple of them. Now, first, I do want to say thanks to B&H for sending me the 100mm to test out and to review. I do have to send it back to them after I'm done shooting this video though, so I'm kind of bummed about that because I've really liked using this lens. So the 100mm macro is very compact in size, has an aperture of 2.8. You can tell this thing is just tiny. It has a really nice focus ring on it, but it is one of those focus by wire rings. On the side of the lens, we have an autofocus manual focus switch, and there's also the autofocus limiter, which can do a really good job at improving the speed of the autofocus on this lens. So you can either use the full range, or you can focus from 0.5 meters to infinity, or you can go from 0.204 all the way to 0.5 meters. You can change that with the size switch on the lens. Also, you get a magnification of 1:1, which is going to be about double some of the other Lumix macros, like the 24-105. It's technically a macro, but I believe it only gets you 0.5 times magnification. Another thing that's really cool about the 100mm, unlike some of the other macro lenses I've used in the past, this one actually doesn't protrude whenever you're using it. So even as you're focusing, you're not going to actually see it move. Also, if you're shooting non-macro, the autofocus on this is fantastic and it works just as well as any other Lumix S prime. Another thing I love about this lens is it kind of doubles as a portrait lens because it has the f2.8 aperture, so you can get plenty of light in with it, and this will do a great job at getting you some compression for headshots. Then you don't have to worry about how far back you are from someone because you can get really close up headshots with the 100mm, where sometimes with a lens like the 85mm, you're not always able to get quite as close up as you would like. Now, one thing I do wish that could be different about the 100mm, if you're shooting non-small items and you're in a confined space like I'm in right now, sometimes 100mm can be pretty tight to work with. One thing I do prefer about a wider macro lens is it gives you a little bit more wiggle room with capturing a whole item or thing in a shot, just in case you're not able to back up any further away from it. But the 100mm works really well. The autofocus on it performs better than any other macro lens I've used. Just know that the autofocus on the 100mm will be limited to the camera body you use. So if you have the Lumix S5 II or S5 IIX or the S9, or whenever they finally release some new cameras, any of the newer cameras, the autofocus on this lens will be fantastic. But if you're using it with the S5 or the S1H or any of the older L mount cameras, you're not going to get as great of autofocus performance out of the 100mm. One thing that is missing from the 100mm is there's no image stabilization on the lens. So you're going to need to have a stabilized body, which Panasonic has some of the best stabilized bodies possible. But I did notice with the 24-105 f4, that one has the IS built in, and I'm able to get slightly smoother shots with it at 100mm than I'm able to get with the 100mm prime. So that is a small trade-off of using the prime macro lens. The Lumix 100mm does come in at $1,000, which is pretty pricey, but you get top-of-the-line size, performance, and image quality out of this lens. So if you need the most pristine possible macro shots with the fastest autofocus and no protruding lens element, this is going to be a fantastic option for you. Now, if you're trying to decide between the 100mm or if you're also looking at the 24-105 by Panasonic, just know that you're going to get double the magnification with this lens over the 24-105. But the 24-105 is a lot more versatile because of the zoom range on that lens. So I use the 24-105 to shoot most of my B-roll, but the 100mm does give me the ability to get some super close shots that I wouldn't otherwise be able to get with the 24-105. And whenever I use this on my slider, I just feel like I can get amazing robotic looking shots because this does have such good autofocus on it, and you just get so much detail on everything that you shoot. If you're trying to decide between the 100mm or the 85mm, then you really need to ask yourself, do you shoot mostly in low light environments or a lot of portraits? In which case, I think you got to decide on mainly the low light performance, because the 85 is going to give you the 1.8 aperture, so it's going to let more light in, and also technically leads to a blurrier background. But I found with the 100mm focal length, it gets even more compression than the 85mm, so the difference between 1.8 and 2.8 on it doesn't seem to be too much, in my opinion, for shooting portraits. Especially if you want more detail and you're going to stop it down a little bit anyways, maybe you go all the way up to 3.5 or f4 to get a sharper shot, then you're not going to notice any difference between the 85 and the 100. The main thing that you'll appreciate about the 100 is you have the versatility to get up super close. So if you're trying to decide between this or some of the other Lumix lenses, then I think you really need to ask yourself what your main goal of shooting is. If you want to show the most texture possible to just get the sharpest, most crisp images, then the 100mm is going to be a better choice than the 84 or the 24-105. But if you want more versatility, maybe a little bit better IBIS, then the 24-105 is more versatile than the 100mm, but it doesn't have as good of image magnification. And again, if we compare the 100 to the 85, I bought the 85 a couple months ago, and I wish I would have just bought the 100mm instead. But that really just goes because I mostly shoot video B-roll and shoot a lot of close-ups, so this lens just serves me a little bit better. If I was shooting a lot in lower light, I would probably buy the 85mm instead. So to tie it all up, I really like the 100mm. This is a lens I'm going to be adding to my kit as soon as possible because of the great autofocus performance, the fantastic image quality, and just the ability to get up really close on your subject and get amazing shots. If you're interested in buying the Lumix 100mm macro, I do have links to buy it at B&H in the description below. If you have any other questions about this lens or any other Lumix gear, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear them. Like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any upcoming content.